Live.
Okay, terrific. Hi, my name is Steve Blank. I'm the editor and publisher of Blank Slate Media, and I'd like to welcome you to our discussion with Jon Kaiman, the former North Hempstead Town Supervisor and current Suffolk County Deputy County Executive. Jon is now running for New York's 3rd Congressional District as a Democrat, and he is helping Blank Slate Media kick off its series of talks with candidates in the race. Jon, welcome to our town hall.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you to Blank Slate for hosting. I think this is it's a great idea and a great opportunity for us to communicate with the voters in this district.
Great, thanks. So let me kick it off. Why are you running?
So I am running because I've spent a career in government. I've been in the private sector. I ran my own law practice. I've tried cases. I would become a judge, but I left the bench and engaged in representative government as a town supervisor and other capacities. And I believe that these times are challenging times. These times are times that call for somebody with experience, with a perspective that understands how government works, what people's needs are, how do we move the pile forward and achieve real results. People have lost confidence, I think, in government and governance. We're splitting at the seams, we're polarized. My experience and my perspective is such that I think I'm the person at this moment in time that can help bring us together, that can help achieve our longer term goals, that can elevate our vision of democracy and of our country and lead us to a place where we do have confidence in those that we elect, and we do believe that we can make change, and we do believe and see that we can feel safe and feel that we have trusted representatives, but also achieve these greater ideas that we want to achieve. And I know that we're going to get into the questions and the specifics, but there's really important issues regarding the Supreme Court and the decisions that are being made. There's important issues regarding environment and climate change. How do we deal with it? There's important issues regarding gun safety and safety in general. There's important issues involving choice and the labor movement and so many other things that are important to us. That I think it's a moment where we call upon someone who has experience, who has perspective, who we can trust. I believe I'm that person, and so I put myself forward to be the next congressman of the 3rd Congressional District.
On that tack, we're in a time where I guess you're raising the question of dealing with the issues, and we'll get to the specifics, but you're also, how do you work together? It was just a vote on whether to refer for an indictment to people who had knowledge of the January 6th attack on the Capitol, and only 2 Republicans out of all the Republicans in Congress voted in favor of basically asking the Justice Department to require someone to testify. How are you suited in this environment? And right now, many people believe that the House is going to flip, that there will be a Republican majority, that Kevin McCarthy will be the new speaker. How do you navigate in that circumstance to get things done when the views seem to be so far apart?
Yeah, I think we go back to some of the basics. You know, we are a nation of laws. This is how we've maintained a level of continuity in our democracy. We need to continue to be a nation of laws. We need to hold people accountable, and that requires that we do that at all levels. And so here in New York, there's questions about do we hold people accountable on one side of the aisle, or do we hold people accountable in certain things but not others? In the nation's capital, when people were literally trying to undermine and possibly overthrow democracy? Do we let them go because it's not convenient or politically convenient to do at the time? I think that we need to establish levels of accountability. We need to talk about it amongst ourselves in Congress and in the halls of power locally, and set standards. And I think that's part of a dialogue that has to happen. The polarized country that we're living in right now is such where it doesn't take much for people, groups of people, entire parties, to completely disassociate from the rules that are set, the institutions that we have, when we find that it's inconvenient. And we're allowing voices that are maybe louder, maybe more articulate at times, maybe more passionate, to swing the country into these or towards these cliffs. And so I think the Republican Party needs to address these issues as to whether or not it can stand for the rule of law and hold people accountable. I think most within that party who are elected would do that given the opportunity, but they're fearful of these other voices that are pushing them to the edge. If I'm in Congress, I'm going to be a voice to engage in that dialogue, to engage in that discussion, to try to change maybe some of the ways we go about coming to decisions so that we can find common ground. We could use common sense. And still do that while maintaining the integrity of our values, believing in the core issues that we do. But we still need to talk to the other side. We still need to stand and sit with them in ways that we're not doing today. And so my whole career has been one where I've been able to navigate the other side of the aisle. I've been able to bring people along. Part of that is education, educating the population, finding common ground on causes and issues and resolutions and laws that we think that we can pass and work together on that are going to make a difference for all within a constituency. And part of it is just having a level of respect for anyone else that we're speaking with, even while we argue and engage them. And again, those who know me know that I don't back off. I'm very much willing to have that argument, to have that discussion, however intense it may become, but to do it with respect, to do it based on substance, to do it based on truth, and to do it in a way that allows others to come along and ultimately find a path that we can make decisions that we all agree are necessary. And holding people accountable for what was done on January 6th is something that I think we should ultimately be doing. We should ultimately be holding people accountable for.
What do you consider to be there are a lot of issues out there, we know. And I guess the one that's right in front of us, I was going to ask you the biggest issues. You've mentioned January 6th. And then there is the situation, and then there's the war in Ukraine, Russia's attack on Ukraine. How would you evaluate the handling of this by the Biden administration? And is there anything that you think that they should have done different, or things that you would like to see done now? Can you hear me, John?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think the Biden administration is doing a good job with this. I think that the president is showing leadership. I think he's showing poise. We need to be cautious in some respects, but we also need to be aggressive. There's no doubt that we should be providing as much support, military support, other support, whether it's food and clothing and virtually everything that we can bring to the table to help the people of Ukraine. We should be providing. I think we're doing that. Can we do more? We could always do more. We need to be creative in thinking of ways to do more. I do believe that we might be at a point where elevating the level of weaponry and military support is probably appropriate. After looking at some of the heinous acts that have been committed, the atrocities, so to speak, we really do need to give the Ukrainian people a chance to not just survive, but now to win the battle, to secure their country, to sustain their democracy. We need to show that NATO, as an institution, stands for something, as we are showing, and I applaud NATO. The way that we've been coming together through this whole ordeal is extraordinary. It's wonderful to see the nations of this NATO institution working together, putting aside differences, and making a difference in the battlefield. We've drawn lines in the sand relating to whether or not other countries are attacked. Certainly, if any NATO country is attacked, that's a significant line. The president has made it clear. But we're at a point where we probably need to escalate to some extent. That said, what would I do? As a congressman, I would certainly be in a position to have additional information and details. I don't necessarily want to second guess what each and every Congress member is doing and senator and would or should do. But I do believe, as a congressman, I would, and I think our Congress representatives today should be very well versed in what's going on, understand the consequences and implications of the decisions that are being made. We do need to be careful. We do not want to start another world war. We do not want to launch into weapons or weaponry that can annihilate parts of our civilization. And yet, there are great risks if we don't take greater or meet greater challenges and maybe take some additional risks. So I support the effort that's going on. I stand by the president. I think he has shown great leadership, and I think we are moving in the right direction. And hopefully, the NATO alliance will be able to find additional voices that can bring Russia and specifically Putin to a place of just sensibility and reality that this is not how affairs are conducted, and then ultimately again to hold those that did this accountable. That is part of what we as a nation, as an institution, should be doing as well. And there should be accountability down the road for what's happened here.
Do you think there's been war crimes committed?
It certainly appears so. Every indication is that there have been. We look at the pictures. We see missiles going into civilians' buildings. These are not mistakes. It does not appear to be an errant shot fired. This is something that the leader of Russia appears to be personally accountable for. There's no statement from him saying that this is wrong or it shouldn't happen, or holding people responsible, accountable. So there's going to be a price to pay for this kind of conduct. Wars are not conducted this way for a reason. Whether or not this can even be considered a legitimate war, and I think it cannot be. There are still parameters within which a country must stay within, and Russia has not. So I do believe, yes, war crimes have been committed, and justice should be done at some point down the road.
In terms of refugees, I think this past week, 2,000 Ukrainian refugees came to our border for refuge. I think President Biden has called for 100,000. This pales in by numbers comparison to countries like Poland, which has taken over 2 million people with a 1/10 or 1/8 our population. What should we do in terms of refugees, and how do we handle the red tape that has stymied other people from coming in more quickly?
We are in a crisis. In a crisis, we amend our rules so that we can efficiently, effectively address the crisis at hand, and we should do that. We should bring in more refugees. We should make them feel at home. We should do everything possible to give them the opportunity to come here and be safe, and utilize our rules in such a way that allows that to happen more efficiently. We should still, we still need to maintain the documentation that we need to maintain. We need to do our investigations. We need to do the traditional work that must be done when we bring in people from another country, especially in an area such as Ukraine. But we have the ability to expedite entry, and then we can still figure out ways to do the other things that need to be done to make sure that we know who's coming in, and that we're able to track where they are and what they're doing, and make sure that they apply the rules that we have going forward, that after this crisis is over, in terms of either staying or going back to their country.
Do you think that 100,000 is enough? Should we be willing to take in greater numbers than that? Certainly, Eastern European countries around Ukraine have taken in many more, and obviously that may be a more desirable destination for somebody who's living in Ukraine. But should we be willing to take in more than 100,000?
I think it's appropriate for neighboring countries to take the bulk of the refugees. I think we should take in what we can, and we need to go through that process and evaluate as we're going. 100,000 sounds like a reasonable number, and let's see how that works. Let's see how long it takes for us to fill that designated amount, and whether we even do. The time that it takes to get there, it could be that this war ends. So I don't think just throwing out unlimited numbers is helpful either. I think we should make it and keep it as a process that we can control and maintain, but we should maintain it quickly and efficiently and bring as many people in as we can. Let's get to that number and then see if there's need for more.
In terms of other issues, what are you? The economy has been mentioned. I'll just ask you a question. And this is, I guess, a two-part. The Biden administration has created more jobs in its first year than any administration in maybe the past 40 years. 4 million people, and more than 4 million people in the first 13 months. But only 28% of Americans actually believe that employment has increased. The majority think that employment has gone down. What do you make of those? What do you make of those numbers?
I think it's something we expected to happen, and I think there's a lag between the reality of the job creation and the mass appreciation and understanding of what's happening. I'm okay with people coming along at their own pace, but we do have an obligation to make sure that we who are in the public, who are speaking about it, are sharing this information, letting people know what's actually happening. There is a reality to these numbers, and others who are creating some level of disinformation because it's politically helpful for them is unacceptable, really. But that's we do understand that's what happens. But the proof is in the pudding. We have the actual numbers coming in, and I think the trends will continue. We are uplifting our economy. We're going to have to deal with inflation, and there's obviously a movement to do that. We need to bring in more oil, and the president has released significant amounts of oil reserves, petroleum reserves. We need to look to the long term. Sure.
This is kind of everybody. We'll get to inflation next. But it seems that the messaging, the question of why people are unaware that the employment performance, we're down to 3.6%. Those are remarkable numbers that nobody needs. How much is that of the Democratic Party and Democratic representatives failing to communicate good news, and not able to present that? The result being that you could end up with a Republican House a year from now because of that inability. It just seems that Republicans are better at messaging than Democrats, and it's just such a crazy number that so few people know that so many jobs have been created.
You know, I, I'm solidly on the Democratic corner on this. I think the Democratic Party does have people who can communicate and do so in a compelling fashion. I hope to be one of them on the Hill at some point soon. But I do appreciate that there's a misunderstanding of what's going on. But I do also believe that there's a lag. It does take time for people to come to appreciate what these numbers really are and what they mean. And we need to continue to as anyone in public office, anyone who's putting ourselves forward, needs to be able to explain to the folks that we're speaking with that the economy is rising, that we do have good things happening, that there's the unemployment is going down to levels that we've not seen. It's a time consuming process. So I wouldn't give up on our ability as a party to communicate these facts. I think that there is a strong pushback on the other side that's trying to suppress this truth, but we will break through with this argument, and people will see that we are able to govern and to manage the finances and to create jobs, to build an economy, to do it in a way that's consistent with our core values, and I think that we have time to do that before the November elections. We are in April, so as we get further in, we might be more concerned. But I think that message is coming out. These numbers are fairly new. They have been trending. They were delayed. We thought they might have happened earlier, and so that was some of the disconnect. But we're on our way. I feel confident that we'll get that message out.
So to the issue of, and it gets combined here, even the good news, and this is true of the media. I will say that you can take a look at your large daily newspapers and broadcasts, not just Fox, but it ties in with inflation, which is a major problem. So, what is your take on inflation, which with the war in Ukraine looks like it's not going to get better fast with what's happening with the rise of energy prices?
Inflation is a real challenge. There's supply chain issues that are a real challenge. There's a understanding that we're caught in between periods where we're still reliant on fossil fuels. We're reliant on the petroleum. Europe is certainly reliant on it. That's creating the world inflation that we're seeing. I believe we have the ability to get ourselves out of that. There is a long-term solution, which is, of course, renewable energies, how we invest in our economies. We need to do it anyway because of our climate issues and our environmental concerns and financial concerns as well. This issue will motivate or speed up our inevitable turn to renewable energy sources. So we need to do everything we can to do that now, but that's going to take time. It's going to take years to get to where we need to get to. So I believe the president is doing the right thing by releasing some petroleum reserves, bringing down the price of fuel. We can see it going down already. The question for Germany, for instance, is whether or not they can sustain higher costs and start cutting off some of the fuel from Russia, and if they do, that's going to generate some additional inflationary costs that we're going to see. And so we're in a crisis. This is a challenging time. There's a war that can lead to catastrophe on a scale that we can't even imagine. And so we need to be in this together. Understand that it is hurting us in our pocketbook in terms of paying more for a number of things. It will not be permanent. This will end. The prices will come down. It might take a little while, but I don't think we could lose hope. I think we should take the opportunity to develop new areas to commit investment into, so that we're not stuck like we are today in terms of chips from China and fuel from Russia. And I think we have to hold the line and get through it.
In terms of another place with costs, as part of the Build Back Better legislation that did not survive the Senate, there was an idea of Medicare negotiating with drug and pharmaceutical companies. Did you support that?
Yes, I certainly believe that we need to be able to use our economy of scale that Medicare has to negotiate prices. The pushback is that will diminish private investment in the drugs that are not yet invented, and so we're putting ourselves at risk. I don't believe that's a compelling argument. I don't believe it's true, and so I think using our ability to negotiate lower prices is really critical. The cost of pharmaceuticals is driving up healthcare costs that are simply unsustainable. We've seen how we can distribute massive quantities of medication through the pandemic. We need to make sure that our investment as a nation is sufficient to cover the investment needs of future medications. But I 100% support negotiating through Medicare to lower pharmaceutical costs.
While we're on healthcare, what else would you like to see done? Now we had President Biden announce changes to, there was a glitch in Obamacare. Do you think that we should have universal health care?
I think we should have universal health care. I do not support Medicare for all. And so I support the Affordable Care Act. I think we should expand it. I think we should amend it. We need to make it work better. It was getting to a point where the costs were starting to rise significantly. I think that there has been a number of potential changes that could be made that will put the Affordable Care Act on a better trajectory. I think that including a public option where there's a portion of our society that can use a public Medicare type healthcare assistance is appropriate. And so I would support a significant investment in a public option so that we can expand Medicare, but I would not support Medicare for all. I simply believe that abolishing private health insurance is not the answer. Having government run all of our health care in this country would not work. Maybe it works in other places. I do not believe it would work here. I think that we need to maintain a level of private health insurance and a private component of this industry, regulated to the point where that we do, and ultimately making sure that everyone has access to healthcare. And we need to do that also at the local level, where in Suffolk County, I live in Nassau County, I live in Great Neck, and I work in Suffolk County as a deputy county executive. We here in Suffolk County have health centers that allow anybody to come in, and we support them in the county. And by doing that, we closed other facilities that are saving us millions and millions of dollars, but we're paying significant dollars, less than we're saving, so we're still doing better than we were. But we're providing that service, and I think that that would be my answer. I am going to have to jump over around here because my computer's unplugged and it's going to turn off in a minute if I don't plug it back in. So I'm going to go do that. All right, that was an intermission.
Yeah, well, computers, that's an emergency.
Yeah, that would be a good.
So can't let them shut down. I'd like to get better. I'd like to discuss a number of issues that came under Build Back Better and get your idea about that legislation that passed the House, but basically because two senators refused to overturn the filibuster and go against it. It was defeated. But let me ask you this. Let's bring things locally in terms of elections. Nassau County, you're running a large part of this district, which is now up in the air. We may get a resolution tomorrow, but last week it was changed to include parts of Westchester and eliminate parts of Queens. A judge has thrown it out. That's been appealed. But Nassau County, either way, looks that it'll remain a major part of your district. What happened in Nassau County? Because we're talking about the politics of being elected and where this country is going and what legislation can be passed. What happened in this last election in Nassau County, where the top offices, where county executive, the town of North Hempstead, where you were supervisor, and where there's been a Democratic supervisor for the past 30 years, turned red. What do you make of what happened there, and does that have any implication of what this race for Congress will be down the road?
I think that people have lost confidence. The Democrats have lost confidence in their own party, to some extent, and many of them stayed home. And others throughout the community were angry and believed a lot of the information that they were hearing. Much of it was not accurate. But the result was that when the larger community feels that those on the Democratic side, or any side, by the way, but this year was the Democratic side, aren't faithfully representing them, aren't effectively representing them, then bad things happen. When people don't vote, bad things happen, and a number of people stayed home. Other people who normally would vote Democratic did not vote Democratic. So it's not simply Democrats not showing up. And so I think we need to look at why that is. We know that the core issue in this election in Long Island, the one that was the driving force, was the bail reform issue. I'm concerned that this one issue is becoming such a polarizing issue that it undermines our ability to show people that Democrats can govern. I believe that we need to open up the discussion on bail reform. I think we need to undo this law and amend it. I think we need to bring more voices to the table to see how it can be amended, and that includes bringing voices that we might not agree with. One of the problems about passing a law when you have this overwhelming majority and you don't need to talk to people who you disagree with, you end up with legislation that is problematic. And while the bail issue needed to be addressed, bail needed to be reformed. We had a system that was unfair, that people were being held in jail because they were poor and not because of what they've done. That is wrong, and that needs to be addressed. And we are addressing it, and we can continue to figure out how to do that. But we also need to hold people accountable for the crimes they commit. The argument that we hear is that 2%, it's only 2% of the people that are arrested and get out with no bail commit violent crimes again. Well, 2%, I believe, is about 2,000 people. And those same 2,000 people don't just commit one crime each. We know, if you study criminal justice, that a majority of the violent crimes are committed by a very small amount of, a small percentage of the people who commit crimes. And so I don't think it's fair to simply diminish this amount of 2% as if that's a reasonable number of violent crimes to be committed and we can somehow justify or sustain that. There's 20,000 people that go out and commit crimes that are not considered violent. And walking into a bar or walking into a street and pushing someone through a plate glass window or punching someone in the face and breaking their nose, that's not considered a violent crime. Those are not considered violent crimes in New York State. You have to have a permanent disfigurement to escalate to that level. We have a district attorney in Manhattan who's saying that he's not going to prosecute such crimes. It has to be felony level crime. If you walk into a liquor store with a gun or a knife or a bat, the district attorney in Manhattan says, the Democrat says, I'm not prosecuting you. He's now changed it. If you use a gun, then maybe he will, but because it's a gun. But you still have this situation where we have a district attorney whose job it is to prosecute those who commit crimes, saying that he's with the other guy, that he's simply, you could walk into a store, you could do what you want to do, and then we're saying, well, 2,000 of those a year are okay. And so people have lost confidence, and certainly Long Island, I believe this is going to spread. I believe that throughout our region, if we don't address this, throughout this state, if we don't address this and give people the ability to have a voice in this law, to have the opportunity to have input and an impact on what we do, then people are going to continue to lose confidence in a particular party that's saying, well, because we believe so much in social justice, we've redefined social justice to mean that anybody could be violated at any time, and that there's no ability for us to hold anybody accountable. And by holding someone accountable, by arresting someone, by prosecuting somebody, that doesn't mean simply putting them in jail for unending days or whatever. That does mean, though, that we have control over what they do for a period of time. We can give them or require that they seek treatment, whether it's for drugs or whether it's for mental health treatment. We can make sure they get the whatever help they need. But we do have to hold them accountable and sometimes deny them the ability to be free. And you know, I've tried cases. I was a lawyer an active lawyer for a long time. I understand that the system is broken in many ways, and I do believe that the Democratic Party is right in wanting to fix this system. And I do believe they've made great inroads in achieving levels of social justice that we can be proud of. The police reform task force that were throughout the state. I sat on and co-chaired the Suffolk County Police Reform Task Force, where we worked with the police. We brought them to the table, including their unions and advocates and people impacted by police conduct and people who represent communities.
What ought to be changed? Because there was the January decision that was folded into the budget where there was nothing. Then there was a response in May where there was a number of changes made. Right now it's being discussed with the state budget. What more do you think needs to be done?
So I think the first thing that needs to be done is that we need to let everybody know that we're going to open it up and look at it again and have input. So it's not simply about me saying they should do A, B, C, and D, and then it's perfect. I don't have all the answers. Nobody does, but I do know that if I'm in the room with people who are thoughtful, who have studied this, people who are impacted by it, people who have opinions on it, that we will get to a better place. So I do believe that we need greater judicial discretion. I do believe that the judges have an ability to discern the public safety concerns that need to be addressed. I do believe that we need to have greater education. I believe we need to have more probation services following the whole person through the system, so that they can get that treatment and help that they need, so that they are being held accountable. And if they do violate some condition that of their release, that they can be brought back in, and they don't get a second and third and fourth chance to go and commit a crime before they're held accountable. And so how we navigate that is complicated, and there's no simple answer. But the way to do it is where we failed. The inclusion and the depth of the discussion that did not occur is where we went wrong. And so I'm saying and arguing that on this issue, we as Democrats can stand up. I am an authentic, lifelong Democrat. I've fought for the issues that we believe in, the core values. I've accomplished these goals from a practical level. I've implemented environmental changes, and I can go through hundreds of them, whether it's environment or infrastructure or helping our seniors or working with labor. I could do all those things. And so I'm a bona fide Democrat who's had great success in achieving our goals of the Democratic Party. And because I question whether or not this process worked perfectly, some would say, well, I'm not bold enough, or I'm not the person that should represent the Democratic Party. I am the Democratic Party, and I believe others are as well, and we should bring all those voices together and not somehow separate ourselves into these little factions, but at least agree that if so many people are concerned, if so many within our community are in fear, if so many people want to have this discussion, why don't we have the discussion? Why don't we open up bail reform? Let people come in and look at the implications, the impacts, the consequences, Look at what we had before and why it needed to be changed. Look what we could have in the future if we make adjustments. Bring people to the table, give everyone a voice, and let's do it together, and I think we'll have a better result. And that will help. That answers the question to why the Democrats lost. If Democrats can show that we're concerned about people's property, we can keep them safe, we can manage their pocketbook, then we too will have success at the polls as well. And I think we'll show that in the future.
Rise in crime, which is kind of part of this. Bail reform has been blamed in New York, but New York is not the only place. But it has been attributed to the Democrats, at least by the Republicans, are making that case. I know we had COVID. At the same time, we had the George Floyd, and we see so many cases where people who are black or brown are not treated the same. So, taking a look at this, what is your take on bringing down the crime rate and increasing social justice at the same time? Is that possible? Is that what's needed, or do you think one needs to be done over the other?
I think it is possible. I think one, we start with guns. There's way too many guns on the streets. The gun laws are out of control throughout this country. The just masses of assault weapons and handguns and 3D guns that we can now print that are over the streets, and you can't even ban them or stop somebody now because of them in so many of these states. That's creating a lot of the violence, or that's leading or enabling, I should say, so much of the violence that's occurring. And so we need to take hold of the whole gun pandemic that we have, and use common sense solutions. We need to be able to hold people accountable. If you have a gun and you lose it, and you're no longer now if you don't need to register it, we don't know if your gun is stolen, where it goes. And people are arguing, well, you have a right to a gun, but you don't no longer need to maintain any documentation. You don't need to have any background check. You don't need to even need a permit for it anymore. These are crazy laws that are just elevating the level of violence in communities under the name of safety, and I think that's a large part of it, and we need to address that. I think we need to continue to look at social justice. There's the longer term way to address violence and is to elevate our educational opportunities and housing and maintain and to give people address mental health issues, and I think we can't just look at that as this long-term thing. There's things that we need to do now. And so in Suffolk County, with the police reform and reimagination task force that I spoke of earlier, we are now going to be sending out, and this is happening in other parts of the country too, we're going to be sending out with our police, if someone calls 911, we're going to send out a mental health professional with that person, or with the police, so that there's actually a person who's trained to deal with this incident that's occurring. And what will happen is the person who's the subject of this incident will now meet a mental health professional who will engage with them. And so the next time they have an issue, maybe it doesn't get to the point where someone has to call 911, they can call their mental health professional that they've now met and they have access to. And if we do that on a scale of the size of Suffolk County has the 12th largest police department in the country. We're 1.5 million people. We have the ability to make an impact on our state if we reduce the consequence of people's mental health episodes by giving them different services. The police provide a certain type of service, but mental health professionals can provide a different service that can help us address the root problem and make the entire community safer. And there's a social justice component to that, because we're no longer putting someone in jail, detaining them, restricting their liberty because they went afoul of the law. We're actually getting them the help. There might be a period where they are restricted, but we now have professionals that are addressing their needs. We need to make sure that the jails are humane. Rikers Island needs to be fixed. I don't know that the idea of releasing everybody, some have argued that the jail is so bad, everyone should be released. That's not justice, and it's not social justice. It's chaos. And so we know how to run jails in our country, but we should do it in a way that's humane, that's dignified, that gives people an opportunity to get to a point where they have every opportunity to not commit further crimes, and that's social justice. We need to train our police better, and in our reform plan, we have all sorts of new levels of training that give police different experiences in terms of how they deal with crisis and violence and people who are in distress. And we're changing the way we elevate police. So instead of promoting a police officer based on how many arrests he or she makes or how many tickets he or she writes, we're going to be using data based on how many times did they get out of their police car and solve a problem for somebody in the community. How many fights did they break up and end the controversy and were able to walk away from it? How many solutions did they come up with in a community that made them part of the solution, as opposed to maybe exacerbating some situation that was tense and with people in distress? And so I think there's absolutely ways to do that, but I think we need to talk with our police. We need to be one with them. We can hold police accountable. Accountability is a common theme here, but we also need to work with the police as part of the solution. Police are people who join the force to become part of the community, to do good. Most of them do, and so we need to figure out ways to elevate and acknowledge or elevate our appreciation and acknowledge what they do. But at the same time, hold everyone accountable.
What do you say when your Republican opponent, if you are the candidate for the party in this race, says that you're the party that wants to defund the police?
Well, that's certainly not me, and I don't believe the party wants to either. I think there were some voices who claimed to speak for the party that spoke of that. I think the president. On down, President Biden and Congress and so many others have made it clear that defunding is not the answer. We reallocate resources in ways that make sense, that both benefit the police and law enforcement, and we reallocate resources that give us the ability to better serve people in the community. That's something that people can agree on, but we need to do it together. We need to have all the voices in the room. We need to make sure that everybody's who has knowledge on a subject is at the table, and that's what we did with our task force. And so, in Suffolk County, we actually hired more police. We filled gaps. There was attrition, and there was a need to bring on some more. We brought in some more corrections. We just hired 20 probation officers. We're elevating law enforcement in areas that make sense, and we're investing in new features in our law enforcement capabilities that allows us to respect diversity, be trained in such a way that enables our law enforcement professionals to see things maybe a little differently than they once did, and so that requires further investment in police. And so it's not our party, that's not my party, that's certainly not me, and that's not those that stand where I stand in the Democratic Party.
Let me ask you on issues that the Democratic Party, the Democrats I alluded to that, to build back better, which I don't think anybody knew, but it did do some things. In fact, a number of it was popular. Do you think that the elements, and let me tick them off, because I think that everybody was confused in terms of there was so much debate over the size and everything else. Universal pre-K, would that be an objective of yours?
Yes, I absolutely support expanding pre-K and universal pre-K. There's some new studies out there that are, challenging some of the former assumptions. But we do know that if people have access to pre-kindergarten, it allows them allows their children to compete, just in terms of educational opportunities, engagement, neural pathways are inspired. I think it's something that we should work towards, no doubt.
The expanded child care credit. This was in the news today because were receiving it are no longer doing it. There was a year that was done under COVID relief, and now those people are more favoring Republicans than Democrats who had qualified for it. This helped cut the child poverty in the United States by half, and then it was eliminated because Build Back Better. Would you like to see that? Is that something that should be brought back on its own?
I think it should be brought back. I think we should look at it in terms of the numbers that we're applying it and how it works, but it did have a significant impact on poverty. We do know that if people have a bare minimum of resources, that they will be able to use that to elevate themselves and ultimately achieve greater success. And so if we marry that with universal pre-K and some other things that are out there, there'd be great benefits to that. So I think that there's a need for long-term credits, but I'd want to see the specifics on it. I do think that we need to make sure that everybody understands exactly what the implications are and what the costs are, and that we can fund it.
Well, let's go to taxes. What do you think now? Number one, there was
Texas or taxes?
Taxes. Texas is a whole different thing. Part of it is the fact that we've been running deficits, and the Biden administration did bring it down in its first year and expects to bring it down more. Partly, he wants to do it by having a wealth tax, 20% minimum on households worth more than $100 million. Would you favor that?
I believe that there's a number of things we need to do on taxes. I think that we need to get back to, I would undo the Trump tax law. I think that was unfair, inappropriate. I would restore SALT. I understand that there's some, modification in the works. Even that might not pass, but I would restore SALT completely. I think New York State taxpayers pay a significant amount, significantly more than we as a state receive, and so this state and other states like New York should get the benefit of the deduction for state and local taxes, which is what SALT is. I think that there's corporations and the wealthy should pay their fair share. What specific number that is and what specific bill it comes through, I would want to see, as opposed to just blanketly saying I support raising taxes here or raising taxes there. I think whenever we talk about raising taxes, we need to do it cautiously and in a way that is we can explain and make sure that we have a thorough understanding of it. So, but I do believe we need to completely address what was done in the last administration, and I support the president's efforts to do so now.
Should there be a minimum tax for corporations that are making?
Yeah, I think so.
You have, I think, 50 of the largest companies. Amazon didn't pay any taxes. In fact, they got money back.
Right. Yeah, 100%. There should definitely be minimum taxes, and the taxes should be significant for a company like Amazon. I think there's ways to achieve that, and I would support that and ultimately work towards that end.
Affordable housing. This is another issue. Suffolk County, I think, has the highest percentage of single-family home zoning, or they're second in the country, and Nassau is third. It's 80% of the homes in Suffolk, 72 in Nassau. And there's a big deficit in affordable housing in the New York metropolitan area. Governor Hochul came up with the idea of the accessory unit so that single-family homes could add to it. That was shot down very quickly. What do you think is there a need for affordable housing in Nassau County? If so, how would you do that?
There's definitely a need for affordable housing in Nassau and Suffolk and Westchester and the entire district that I'm planning and hoping to represent. We need to achieve that through local zoning and the local zoning is should remain local, but it does need to be able to utilize, or local municipalities need to be able to utilize federal supports to incentivize housing units and multiple family housing. Multiple family housing should be in all communities. It should not be in just one or the other. It should be, though, built where in a way where we can have it attached to transit-oriented development, where there's an ability to be in an area that's better able to accommodate more density in housing. A lot of the infrastructure in our region is old and archaic and needs to be upgraded. When developers want to build, the responsibility and requirements should be that they upgrade the infrastructure around us, including roads and wastewater pipes and water, access to water and wells. And if we do it that way and allow for affordable housing as part of the development process in transit-oriented areas, which is downtowns and main streets and that type of thing, and give greater density, I think we would be able to significantly increase the housing stock on Long Island and in our region.
Abortion, I guess, could be coming before Congress again, or can be coming before Congress if Roe v. Wade is overturned. Let me ask you this: what is your reading of of today's Supreme Court and what they're doing?
Yeah, I think.
As someone who was a judge for a time, in terms of how they are overturning precedents of many years, and one looking that's in their sights is Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, I think they're failing miserably. The whole notion that you can somehow say that you're going to not overturn Roe v. Wade, but you're going to let individuals sue women, doctors, the driver, the person who drives a woman to an abortion clinic, and sue them for $10,000, and you could have 100 people suing. It's vigilante lawyerism. The whole thing smacks of just an abandonment, an abdication of judicial responsibility, and they're doing it in the worst way. It's because they're using the language of our institutions of the judiciary to justify a complete abdication of their responsibility. I believe in a woman has the right to choose. I believe we should support the Women's Health Protection Act. I think we need to codify Roe v. Wade. We need to make sure that we have judges that understand the value of the precedent and make sure that they do not allow, or that we do not allow the judiciary to undermine what a core tenet of our country. Even today in the Times, they talked about how they're going after birth control pills, or going after contraceptives. At what point does it stop? And the answer is it doesn't. And so either we have a right to our bodies or we don't. And I believe that we do. I believe the court should sustain that right, and just to make sure that it continues to exist, we should codify that right nationally and in individual states as well.
I guess this goes back to a question we asked in the beginning, and since we're drawing close to the end of our time, but the ability, you're also dealing with issues of people are talking about critical race theory being taught in schools, and pedophilia and the Don't Say Gay in Florida.
Right.
And this type of discussion, how do you reach common ground with people in another party, a Republican Party that has grown so extreme? What is the best way to respond to these things that are being said and done?
I think it's dialogue. I think there's a sense of and I believe the whole history that we've experienced these last number of years is that there's an anger and frustration that allows people to take a kernel of information and magnify it in such a way that it becomes a new truth. And then people are defending what are and feel like real truths. And so we need to break them down again to those kernels. We need to create dialogues where people in communities who get along on so many other issues, but somehow feel like we're at war with each other. We need to open up the lanes of discussion.
What role would a congressman have in there?
You know, a congressman has a bully pulpit. A congressman has the ability to walk into a community and say, we need to have this discussion. And I respect what people's concerns are. We all want to protect our children. We all want reasonable things to happen in the classroom. But this sense that these things are happening, we need to teach history. History is not always pretty, and there's things that make us uncomfortable, and that's okay. We need to be able to respect people's realities in terms of words and gender and how we portray them. And what a congressman can do is, of course, we can look to pass laws that protect people's rights, and I will continue to do that. I've formally did that as a lawyer in terms of protecting First Amendment rights. I litigated it. But I think that as a bully pulpit, as a leader in a community, as a voice that has credibility, can bring people together and again break down those disconnects, so that we can see the humanity in the people that we're so viciously attacking day in and day out, and we can somehow rise with different perspectives. You know, focus on different identities, that different roles that we play that are more common with one another. And if we do that, we will break this gridlock, this deadlock, this death grip on truth and reality. And I will be part of that voice as a congressman and as a leader in our community.
There's been a number of, well, let me ask you, I'll get to that question. Voting rights is one other. What would you do right now that's taking place? There has been legislation. It has been stopped. There's concern that in passing that legislation, what should be done with voting rights, not only suppression, but also you're seeing the possibility of subversion in some states?
Well, I think we should start by passing the voting rights bills that are there. The Advancement Act is, to me, an obvious first start. We need to protect people's rights to vote. The Supreme Court, again, is at the root of this failure that's occurring right now when they decided to lift the prohibition or need for states that have a history of discrimination to get permission from the federal courts to change voting rules. Once the Supreme Court did that, the floodgates opened, and so we're now at a point where states are using their legislative abilities to create limitations, restrictions, and oppress and suppress the vote. To have one community that has to wait online for 6, 7, 8, 9, 12 hours to vote, and that community tends to be a community of color, where a community in a wealthier neighborhood of different folks, you can vote in 15 minutes. Something is wrong there, and that's not accidental. We understand, we know that that's not accidental. We've seen the documentation that shows that it's not accidental. And so I think putting in laws at the level of Congress is the first step. We need to also show that there's, and continue to support secretaries of state and their efforts and their independent roles, so that people, that states cannot and somehow take away the independence of the voting apparatus that we have, and simply give it to whoever is in the majority. And in those states, there's Republican majority, so they're trying to take control of the voting process, and then use that control to decide the outcome. I have studied this at some length, and I do believe that we have our work cut out for us. This is a dangerous time in our country because of this very thing. If we lose the freedom to vote, if we lose the independence of our vote, if we lose the ability to have fair and accurate elections, then we really are in jeopardy. This is how democracies die. And so I think at the national level, we need to put in these laws. I support them to protect people's voting rights. And at the state level, we need to really dig down within people of goodwill and a sense of purpose and justice to make sure that legislators that are subverting the right to vote and the rule of law need to be challenged. And I will support and work on that with people throughout the country to achieve that end.
Now, you're running in a race where you have, at I think this point, 5 opponents for
Yes.
the Democratic nomination. In some cases, one of the candidates has received a great number of endorsements, including those in the town of North Hempstead, where you were supervisor for 10 years. How does one read into that? Is that an indication that of your ability? Is that a negative indication of your ability to gain votes in the Democratic Party?
Well, I certainly don't think so. We know that endorsements, everyone seeks endorsements, but we know endorsements don't win elections. We know that in this last election, many of the Democratic candidates had the same endorsements that some of my opponents have and have lost their races. And that's an indication that with all those endorsements and all that support, that didn't help them get over the finish line. The history that I have is with the Democratic voter, the voter that has supported me, has voted for me, has enabled me to do the things I've done, to make the great changes I've done in North Hempstead, such as bringing Project Independence, where we help seniors age in place and get to their medical visits. I've created 311. I've repaired wetlands and created recycling programs where tens of thousands of students participated. The people that I've served, they're the ones that know my worth and my value and my ability to represent them, and I'm going to stick with them. I also appreciate that that others who have been seeking endorsements have started that process long before I knew I would be a candidate. And so those that have worked at helping folks and getting those endorsements, asking for them months, maybe years before I was on this back in the political arena, I hats off to them. Endorsements are nice, but they don't win elections. I'm going to win this race because of my connection to the people, the work that I've done, the abilities that I have, and ultimately the confidence that the voter will have, I believe, in me to represent them faithfully as a Democrat in the United States Congress.
Let me ask you for a final question. I'll give you your opportunity to give us in a minute, because we're running out of time, or actually past time, of why people should vote for you, why Democratic voters in this upcoming primary should vote for Jon Kaiman.
These are challenging times, and this is a moment in our country's history where experience counts. We need people who have met challenges, who have represented who we are. We need people who understand how government works in a way that is connected to the local individual resident, the local voter. I have that history. I've served at the county level. I've served at the town level. I've helped New York State in times of crisis. I've helped lead Sandy relief after Superstorm Sandy, when tens of thousands of people were out of their homes and needed somebody to address the chaos and the dysfunction that was occurring. I've overseen finances of Nassau County as the chair of NIFA. I've served as a judge. I understand the really intrinsic issues that we're dealing with that are concerning people today, especially regarding the criminal justice system. I've been active in my community. My family and I have lived in our community for decades. We're part of the fabric of our community. I understand what it means to raise a family in a suburban community that is on the coast, the Sound Coast. I have a lifetime of experience that suggests that what I've done in the past matters. I have a lifetime of experience and accomplishments and results that suggests that I can be put forward when this country is in crisis, when we are polarized, when we are concerned about the survival of our nation, when the world is at war, when there's crisis environmentally wherever we turn. These are not times to learn on the job. This is a moment where somebody with my experience, my perspective, my history, and my potential is able to be brought forward and help us as a community. I think people will respect that. I hope they see that as a basis for voting for me in June in a primary and then ultimately in November. I think by every indication that there is a respect for the work I've done by those who know me and those who have seen what I've done and what I could do. And that's my case. I hope to be the next congressman for the 3rd Congressional District. My life story is consistent with where we are going and what we need. And I believe that this is a time for Jon Kaiman to be elected to the United States Congress. And I hope the people agree.
Okay, well, thank you. I'd like to thank Jon Kaiman for this important conversation, as well as all of those who attended. I'd also like to thank our sponsor of our town halls, Northwell Health, for sponsoring this evening's discussion, and others. For those who are unable to watch today or want to see it again, a recording of the discussion can be found on Blank Slate Media's website, theisland360.com, our Facebook page, and our YouTube channel. A story about this evening's event will also appear in the 6 Blank Slate newspapers next week. I want to also thank Brandon Duffy, our reporter, who will be reporting on it, and also provided the technical assistance for this evening. And again, Jon, thank you very much for taking the time and sharing your views with us.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Blank Slate Media, and for the opportunity. I really appreciate it, and I think this is a wonderful service that you're doing for the district and the larger community as well. So thank you.